Members and the public have questions and concerns about recent tariff actions, and that's okay. We should think about tariff impacts and ask questions. Thoughtful and respectful debate on these issues is good and is why we call hearings like this one with the U.S. Trade Representative. And again, welcome. We need to think strategically about tariff policy, including how to minimize unnecessary costs on American families. I also recognize that although it is easy to see the costs arising from tariffs, it's also far more difficult to assess the cost of denied market access opportunities. Tariffs can advance American interests in market access. In the first Trump administration, we saw tariffs used to stop France from imposing discriminatory digital service taxes. Tariffs also forced China to discuss the systemic challenges between our two nations. Frankly, every enforcement action, whether it's a WTO dispute, a Section 301 investigation, or a preference program review, ultimately relies on the threat of tariffs to secure objectives. Accordingly, it's important to contextualize the tariffs in the design of the larger policy. The real headline then becomes the fundamental shift in trade policy since President Trump's inauguration, where the United States now actually plans to do trade again. My colleagues and I in Congress want to pursue a real trade policy. That was put on hold during the Biden years. We now have a president who will partner with us in that effort, and together we will enforce our rights, we will negotiate again, and we will expand opportunities for Americans. This administration is not deliberating endlessly over whether trade can be a force for good, like the past administration, which refused to even engage in bipartisan or bilateral market access trade negotiations. Trade today is the centerpiece of our international economic engagement, and we have plenty of substantive trade ideas to discuss. Businesses want certainty from good policies that will continue so that they can invest confidently in prospects that create jobs and wealth. That is one of the primary reasons that I'm working hard to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, to provide businesses with the certainty they need to make long-term investments to drive growth and increase prosperity across all segments of the economy. Contrast this kind of certainty and forward thinking on trade with that of the last 4 years, where the only certainty was that you were going to lose ground because your government fundamentally rejected free markets, free enterprise, and free trade. The last administration turned to industrial policy because it was certain that the free market failed in delivering what government planners believed was necessary for climate and social agendas. Indeed, China's central planners saw their own strategic thinking in the Inflation Reduction Act's approach of bestowing massive subsidies to stimulate investments that the market would not. We can restore faith in free markets by making it easier than ever to do business in America. The President's executive order last week to assist major investors to navigate our regulatory system efficiently is a good start. We plan to do more. The Biden administration provided us with only the certainty that in the face of a foreign government's discriminatory policies like digital service taxes, data localization, or other non-tariff barriers, it would not stand up for its citizens because it believed that the so-called right to regulate trumped the principle of free enterprise. Respectfully, democratic governments do not have rights. They exist to secure rights for their citizens. One immediately welcome change under the Trump administration appeared last week in the USTR's National Trade Estimate. Last year, the Biden administration deliberately cut from the estimate a number of discriminatory measures imposed on America by foreign governments because it sided with those governments over our citizens. This year's estimate is exhaustive because the administration carefully identified all of the ways that Americans lose out in the global marketplace. Finally, the validity of free trade will be seen again. The last administration did not pursue market access in its negotiations. Instead, it demanded governments to undertake a number of social and environmental commitments even ones Congress did not approve of domestically. Not surprisingly, our partners did not put their trust in such negotiations. While tariffs inherently may be seen at odds with free trade, we must also acknowledge that many of our trading partners deploy barriers that have gone unchallenged for too long. Free trade, by definition, must be reciprocal. We do not have it if others can impose barriers on us unchallenged. Our failure to enforce our rights over the last 4 years lost a lot of ground for us. This cannot continue because what I am certain about is that American goods and services are innovative, high quality, and globally competitive. Senior administration officials say that a number of countries are coming to the table to engage with the USTR. We look forward to hearing about this engagement and the steps toward better opportunities for Americans. With that, I turn to Senator Wyden for his remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, today's hearing on the President's trade agenda begins with American retirement funds, investors, and our economy in purgatory thanks to Donald Trump's plan to hike tariffs to levels not seen since before the invention of the automobile. Prices are continuing to increase. Markets for made-in-the-USA products are slamming shut around the world. The U.S. economy has gone from the envy of the world to a laughingstock in less time than it took to finish March Madness. Through it all, Donald Trump and his advisors have yet to provide an understandable explanation, any explanation for what his tax hike on the American people is supposed to accomplish. And so this morning, I'd like to focus on one central question. What is the plan? In the last week, the White House has been all over the map when it comes to this question. There is no clear message of how the tariffs were determined, what they're supposed to accomplish, how long they'll be in place, whether they're a negotiating tool or a move to try and cut the United States off from global trade and usher in a new era of 1870s-style protectionism. In the days since Donald Trump announced his tariffs, the President and his advisors have repeatedly changed their stories on all of these questions. Last Thursday, Donald Trump said, quote, "The tariffs give us great power to negotiate," just after Secretary Lutnick and a top economic advisor told reporters the tariffs were not up for negotiation. Then the stories changed again on Sunday when the Secretary of Agriculture and the top White House economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, both said Trump's tariffs were bringing foreign countries to the table, hoping to negotiate new deals to cut tariffs. At nearly the same time, the Treasury Secretary was on TV Sunday saying the tariffs would remain in place for, quote, days and weeks. Asked if the tariffs were up for negotiation, the Commerce Secretary said Sunday, "The tariffs are coming." He announced it, and he wasn't kidding. The tariffs are coming. And yesterday in the Oval Office, Donald Trump said there can be permanent tariffs and there can also be negotiations. So again, this morning, what we want to know is what is the plan? The stock market is up a bit this morning on yet another round of rumors that Donald Trump might not go through with his full barrage of tariffs. Yet this weekend, Donald Trump retweeted a post on Truth Social arguing that Trump is crashing our economy and markets on purpose as a strategy to lower interest rates. Is it possible that's the plan? Tank the economy so wealthy people can borrow money more cheaply? We know that billionaires like Howard Lutnick and semi-billionaires like Scott Bessent won't mind paying more for groceries or gas. It's a drop in the bucket for them. But for families, higher costs are going to get hurt. Higher costs are going to hurt. The nonpartisan Yale Budget Lab predicts the tariffs will cost families $3,800 in the first year alone. In Mr. Greer's confirmation hearing, he argued that economic security leads to strong national security. Our country is getting the opposite with these pointless tariffs. Destroying the foundations of our economy is not only disastrous for workers and families, it makes our people less safe. So you look at Stellantis, the auto company, laying off 900 workers in response to the tariffs. I talked to Pacific Northwest fruit growers who are being told no more American exports, and I hear from small businesses in Oregon that they'll have to pay more for the materials they use to make their products. And I worry that Americans will soon be poorer and face greater threats to our national security thanks to these Trump policies. Is that the plan? Colleagues, I'm going to close with this. The Trump aimless, chaotic tariff spree has proven beyond a doubt that Congress has given far too much of our constitutional power over international trade to the executive branch. It is time to take that power back. On a bipartisan vote, 51 senators sent that signal last week by stepping in and passing legislation to lift Trump's reckless tariffs on Canada. Well, now Donald Trump has slapped tariffs on about 180 countries, and this is a big unforced error that requires a big response. So let me close with this announcement. Today, I am proposing a new bipartisan privileged resolution to end the latest crop of global tariffs that are clobbering American families and small businesses. Members on both sides of the aisle ought to know that this is a call to action, and Congress must step in to rein this president on trade. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And Ambassador Greer, you may now make your statement.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, I appreciate you taking the time today for this hearing. Last Wednesday, President Trump declared a national emergency in response to the large and persistent trade deficit that has built up in recent years. This deficit is driven in part by non-reciprocal tariffs, trading barriers, and other economic policies pursued by our foreign trading partners. The situation is urgent. President Trump imposed tariffs to address this emergency, and these measures are aimed squarely at achieving reciprocity and reducing our massive trade deficit to reshore production in the United States. This national emergency declaration and tariff action is the most significant change in U.S. trade policy since we allowed China to join the World Trade Organization. The American working class, in particular, has suffered concentrated losses from the so-called China shock and other adverse effects of past trade policy and the conditions that give rise to this massive trade deficit. You've heard some of these numbers before. The United States has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs and 90,000 factories since 1994. President Biden left with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit in goods, the largest of any country in the history of the world. The United States' share of world manufacturing output declined from 2001 to last year. In the fourth quarter of 2024, U.S. manufacturing as a share of gross domestic product was the lowest it had been in 20 years. During COVID, we were unable to procure semiconductors to build our cars or materials for pharmaceuticals and personal protective equipment. During World War II, we built nearly 9,000 ships. Last year, the United States built only 3 ocean-going vessels. Our agricultural trade balance, which historically resulted in trade surpluses for our farmers, was in deficit the last 2 years of the Biden administration and likely will take some time to recover. These are all serious indicators of an economic and national security emergency, and we can't ignore it. One important driver of these negative trends has been unfair, unbalanced, and non-reciprocal trade. This includes the effect of higher tariffs imposed by other countries on the United States, the effect of non-tariff measures that promote other countries' exports and obstruct U.S. exports, and other foreign economic policies favoring overproduction and degrading America's manufacturing capacity. And the lack of reciprocity is an important driver of our global trade deficit and with particular countries. So it's common sense to focus on these indicators. For example, the European Union can sell us all the shellfish they want, but the EU bans shellfish from 48 states. The result is a trade deficit in shellfish with the EU. We only charge a 2.5% tariff on ethanol, but Brazil charges us an 18% tariff. The result? We have a large trade deficit in ethanol with Brazil. Our average tariff on agricultural goods is 5%, but India's average tariff is 39%. You understand the trend here. Our trade deficit, driven by these non-reciprocal conditions, is a manifestation of the loss of the nation's ability to make, to grow, to build. And the president recognizes the urgency of the moment. On the first day of his second term, President Trump issued a comprehensive memorandum setting out his trade policy directive. And over the past 10 weeks, he has executed